from My Creative Scoop, and I'm super excited to be back with another Copic marker tutorial for Neat and Tangled. This month I'm going to be using my favorite stamp set from Neat and Tangled called Santa's Wonderland, and I'm going to be sharing with you two different ways that you can color snow. So we're going to first color using the Seas, which is a cool gray. And the second snowman we're going to be coloring, we're going to be using some blues. And I'm going to color the rest of the accessories on the snowman the exact same and just change the way that I'm coloring the background just to accent the different shades of snow that we're going to be coloring. So let's get started. Okay, so for this guy we are going to be coloring him with the C's. So I'm going to be using C0 and C2. If you don't have these particular colors, you can always use like C00 and C1 or C3. So I usually, especially when you're coloring something small, I usually like to skip between colors so that way you can really get that dark to light contrast without using so many markers, because then you have a tendency of just filling in more of the image. You don't necessarily need to do that, especially when you're coloring something that's white or like something like snow, where you just want to just shadow the area and you don't want to necessarily color it fully in. So I'm going to start with my C2, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a shadow into the shadowed areas. So the shadowed areas are going to be right underneath the hat, because the hat would be casting a shadow onto the snowman's face. And I'm going to come down along the sides just a little bit just to round it off. And then also underneath, right behind where the scarf is, I'm just going to add a little bit of a shadow. And if you have a little bit of a heavier hand, you might want to think of it as you're just kind of tracing the outline of the image. So that way you don't feel like you're coloring it in, but you're just giving that little bit of an outline. And then I'm also going to be adding a shadow directly underneath this scarf along the bottom here. And again, just like how we kind of came down a little bit, I'm going to have it come down on the sides and just taper off. And we'll add a little bit of a shadow underneath where the scarf is hanging. So now I'm going to take my C0, and I just want to blend this out. So I don't want to fill in the rest of the area that is white. I just want to soften the line between the C2 and the white from the paper. So I'm just going to do kind of like a heavy flick. So when my marker comes off the page, it's already blending nicely into the white. So that way it's kind of erasing that harsh line. So I'm going to do a couple of flicks here just to erase or blur out that harsh line. So now we have a shadowed area. And then along the bottom here, I'm just going to do the exact same thing I did before, just kind of still tracing along the outline of the image, because I don't want to add too much of a shadow and end up filling in all of the area if I were to flick it going out back that way, because we want this center part to be white. We're just shadowing. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. And now you have a shadowed snowman. Now if you want to go a step further and really define that shadow, you can take another higher up number. So I'm going to take my C4, and I'm just going to really focus on just the outline. So I just want to deepen that line between the outline and where we started coloring. And this really makes it stand out and makes it, I call it my make it pop. So just by adding that tiny bit of color, it really shows that you have that shadow there. It kind of gives it, since we blurred out that C2, just to give that definition into the image again. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to come down just slightly and then trace that outline. And the same thing over here. And that's it. So we want it to really stay white. So now I'm going to color the rest of his scarf and the hat and stuff that's on our image. So I'm going to take my G85. We're going to color the scarf green. So you're also going to need your G82. And I'm just going to go underneath from the bottom of each part of the different sections of the scarf. and also I want to increase that little indentation where the scarf is folding. And then I'm also going to come along the bottom of this part of the scarf and also along the sides, because we want it to appear round, so we want this to really look like it's going behind the snowman, so it has to have a little bit of a shadow, so it's dark and it's going to round out the scarf. Now I'm going to take my G82 and I'm going to do a heavy flick, so that way it's a lot lighter, but I'm really blurring out that line of the G85. So I'm still leaving white area because I want it to be lighter. If I were to cover it up right now and then go back and add my darker colors again, I'm just adding that extra layer of my G82 if I were to fill this in now, and I want that to stay its lightest. So now I'm going to take a little bit of N5. This is really going to make the green stand out and be more rich. So I don't want it to necessarily be the gray. We're going to make this green a darker green by using the gray. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing I did when I first added the G85. So I'm just going to add a little bit of color just along the bottom. You could still think of it as outlining the outline of the image, so that way you're not adding so much color down. So even just that little bit of color right there really makes that green stand out. So now we're going to replace that N5. We don't want it to be gray, we want it to be a darker version of the green. So I'm going to go back over that N5 to make it a darker version of this green. And this is such a great way to get use out of your ends, and you don't have to have all the markers. You can use the ends to deepen, so that way you have that really dark to light contrast. So now I'm going to take my G82 and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do that heavy flick, so that way I have a nice blend on the colors that I already have down. And then once I do have that nice blend, then I'll do one swipe over to fill in so there's no more white showing. So we have a detailed, very shadowed scarf. So now we're going to go ahead and do the part that's sticking out. So again, we're going to go back with our G85, and under where this is coming out, that's where we want it to be darker, because this is folding in, being tucked away. So we want to add the shadow right in that area. So I'm just going to come down right in this crease and also along the side and a little bit underneath here. There's not going to be a whole lot of shadow on that back part of the scarf because there's just not a whole lot of it showing. So now I'm going to take my G82 and do that heavy flick again till I get, this is just going to be filled in all the way. So I'm leaving that area white so that way it stays its lightest. I'm going to go back with my N5, add that deeper shadow up here in the corner, and also back where this piece of the scarf is overlapping this back piece. So it's just a little bit of color just to make it pop. I'm going to replace that N5 with my G85, so go directly over it, flicking and pulling that N5 through, and then my G82, get that nice blend, and then once it's blended, I'm going to just do that one stroke over to fill in so there's no more white. So now I'm going to color his hat, so we're going to make it red. So I'm going to be using R39, R37, and R35. I'm going to start with my R39 and just right along the back part. So just like how we did with the scarf, we want this part to look like it's going behind, that it's wrapping, so we want it to be shadowed. So right in this little corner here and going up all along the back side of the scarf, so it looks like it's wrapping around the snowman's head. And then also I'm just going to go very thin right above the striped area of the hat, so that way this part looks like it's coming out. You know, it's usually a lot fluffier than the top part. So I'm going to take my R37 and we're going to flick, blending out that R39, still leaving this area right in here thinner, so it's not as thick as we're going along the sides. So it has that roundness. If we were to fill in all of making this a little bit thicker, then you're going to lose that that look. So now I'm going to take my R35 and again get that nice blend and still leaving that center part white so it stays the lightest. So I'm going to take my N5 and we're going to deepen this red. So this is one of my favorite things to do, especially with red, and a lot of people have a hard time coloring red because it's hard to get that dark to light and because red is such a vibrant color. But I love taking the N5 and just deepening that shadow, just like how we did with the green. But for some reason with the red, it stands out so much more. So just along the corners here and just coming up along the side. And then we're going to replace that color, the N5, with the R39. So go directly over it. And then again with my R37. And then again with my R35. So get that nice blend along the edges and then do the one swipe over so it's fully colored. Now we're going to add we're going to make the stripe part of the hat seem white. So I don't want to use the C's since that's what we used for the snowman. So I'm going to use the N's. We're going to use a little bit of N5 and N1. I'm going to start with my N5 and I'm just going to go right along the bottom. Just again, think of it as outlining the image, but this time instead of staying on the snowman, we're staying on the hat and along the top. And this is a great way to, if you were to accidentally go in with a little bit of red into the part that's striped, covering it up with the N5 works great if you need to fix your mistakes. So now I'm going to take my N1 and I'm just going to come up just slightly because I still want this part to be white, but I just want to give it that shadow. So I'm just going to come right along the side, still leaving that center part white. We're going to do the same thing with the bottom parts of the scarf. So right at the bottom of the green, I'm going to add a little bit of a line with my N5 on both sides. And then I'm going to take my N1 and go right beside it, still leaving that white area. That way it has a little bit of color. So we're going to make him have a little black button nose. So instead of using the N5 first, I'm going to take my N1, fill in the nose completely, and then I'm going to take my N5 and I just want to go along the bottom. Again, think of it as just outlining that image. That way it has just that little bit of a shadow just going underneath. So now I'm going to color this little present over here also red. So I'm going to take my R39 and we're going to start at the bottom and go up that little piece of ribbon up the center, and then we'll take the R37 and go up a little bit higher, and then my R35. We're just going to fill it all in. Since I don't want to add a whole bunch of layers, especially to something that's so small and it's already taking up all the room because there's not a whole lot of room for those three colors, I don't want to go back and add another coat of everything, because once that area is saturated, it's going to start spreading outside of your outline, and you don't really want that. So, and there's not a whole, you don't really need to go back over because it's nice and blended out. So, but I'm just going to take my N5 and just go along the bottom of the present and then up that center just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of a shadow. So then we're going to go ahead and do the little stocking over here. Let's make it green. I'm going to take my G85 and go directly underneath the fuzzy part that we're going to make white, and just go along that back side of the stocking. Now I'm going to take my G82, and again we're just going to fill it in since there's not a whole lot of room. And then I'm going to go back with my N5 just to deepen that shadow. It's just a little bit. So then we're going to take the N5 again, and I'm going to come along this back part of the fluffy part of the stocking and just outline the back part of the image. And then we're going to take our N1 and go right along the side, just kind of blurring out that N5, still leaving that little bit of white. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the little ornament right there, and let's do it red and green. So I'm going to take, since there's not a whole lot of room, we're going to take the R35 first, and I'm going to color in the top part because it's like it has little stripes on it, and I'm also going to color in the middle one so that way it skips between colors. And then we'll take the G82, fill in the rest. And then now let's go ahead and take our N5, and I'm just going to shadow along the entire back side. So I just outlined that little bit of the image. Then I'm going to go back with my R35 just to kind of pull in some of that N5. And then we're going to do the same thing with the green with the G82. So I'm going to pull that N5 through so it blends that out a little bit better so it's not such a harsh line. Alright, so we're going to do his little buttons, and we're going to also do the blacks just like the nose. So let's start with the N1, and we're just going to fill them in completely. And then we're going to take the N5, and I'm just going to go right at the bottom of each of these little buttons. And we want to go on the bottom because it's going to make it stand out and make it look more 3D. So we have our cute little snowman. Let's go ahead and color the little top part on his hat. So I'm going to take my N5 again, and we just want to outline the bottom. And then I'm going to take my N1, come out just a little bit more. So that way he's got a little bit of a shadow there. So we're going to color this guy the exact same way, but instead of using the C's, we are going to be using blues. Okay, so I already have everything colored just like how we have the one that we colored with the C's. I just need to do the shadowing in the blue. So for this, we're going to be using B00 and B000 and B95. I'm going to start with my B00, and we're just going to go in the exact same shadowed areas. So I'm going to come right underneath the hat, and a little bit coming down, tapering off around his face, and then also underneath the scarf and coming down his body, and a little bit underneath the scarf. Now we're going to take the B000, and we're going to do that heavy flick. So I'm just going to lay the marker down and just do these little baby flicks so that way it blends nicely into my paper. And also down here, we're going to come down a little bit more. And then I'm going to take my B95, and we're just going to think of it as outlining the image. So I'm just going to go right underneath the hat. And then I'm going to stay really close to the scarf. So I'm just outlining just a little bit, just giving it that extra little, make it pop. And then underneath the little pieces here. And there you have it. So you have two different versions of coloring snow, and I'm gonna die cut them out so I can get them on the card. Okay, so here are my completed cards. I used my Distress Oxide inks to sponge a circle onto my card base. I used my Stormy Sky and Hickory Smoke so I can have a blue background for my blue snowman and a gray background for my gray snowman. And I also used my white gel pen to create the sparkles and snow falling into the background. I hope you enjoyed this month's tutorial using Neat and Tangled's Santa's Wonderland. and I will see you again next month. Thanks for watching.